Hey guys, this is one. Thank you for coming to my first ever Reddit AMA. I'm ashamed, I'm embarrassed to admit that I'm kind of new to Reddit. I'm not a big social media person, just started getting into it more in COVID. I hear Reddit is the place for smart, interesting people that are into science and comedy and psychedelics, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm your guy. Those are the things that I'm really into. I thought I'd give you a little origin story of the. I thought I'd make a video. It occurred to me moments ago that it would take me forever to write out some of the background of the film Psychonautics. So if you've seen Psychonautics, thank you. If you haven't seen it, it's on Amazon Prime and a bunch of other platforms. And what happened was I was on this. I have been a comedian for 17 years. Midway through my career, I had already done a bunch of late night stuff and was doing had some nice credits under my belt as a traditional comedian. Started doing longer form things and started putting together kind of concept shows. I've always been big into science. I got really, really, really obsessed with a lot of evolutionary psychology and biology and that sort of stuff. I put together a special called Mating Season. It was it was okay. It was my first time trying to do a full sciency show, and then I did a album called My Big Break. That was my first time where I kind of figured out how to integrate science concepts into and stand up comedy together. And then after that, I just so happened to be on Pete Holmes' You Made It Weird podcast to promote that album. He asked me how I broke my feet. I said, well, I was actually going to Sedona. What were you going to Sedona for? Oh, I was supposed to go and do ayahuasca for my very first time, which I didn't get a chance to do because instead I was out hiking and I broke my feet. That's the album. And he's like, what's ayahuasca? And then I started, this is years ago, and then I started saying, well, there's a stuffed DMT that I smoke. What's DMT? And then when I started explaining what DMT was, I all of a sudden kind of started becoming known as the DMT guy. People are having me on their podcast to share my DMT stories. And I had all this material about psychedelics. And for me, psychedelics were about integrating we're about exploring the mind. A lot of the questions that I ask neuroscientists and psychologists and stuff actually come from a lot of psychedelic experiences. A lot of my mindfulness, a lot of my ideas about consciousness come from the psychedelic experience. And so then I started putting together. I was a traditional club comic, and knowing that I couldn't do a whole show about psychedelics in a traditional, hey, it's date night, let's go laugh at some dick jokes kind of place, I went to, I started doing little indie music venues and stuff on off nights just as an experiment. I had no idea. I had been eating mushrooms by myself for years. I wasn't in I'd never been to Burning Man or any of these psychedelic communities or anything like that. Then this show just kind of took off for me. This show, A Good Trip. And I went on all these big podcasts to promote a 111 city tour that I'd put together. And I was on Mark Maron's podcast that Matt Schuler, the producer of Psychonautics, heard. He makes a lot of he produces a lot of comedy specials for people. And so he already knew who he was. He had been a comedy manager for a while and been in the comedy business and wanted to make a film. At the beginning, he wanted a scripted film about something. He didn't even know what. He just wanted to make a film. Then, I I talked him into. I was never really interested in writing a script for a thing. I was never interested in acting. I was interested in doing documentary things. So over the course of a few months, I was feeling mad out, and I wasn't really. I didn't know if I was. I was kind of happy with. I was on this big, exciting tour. I was kind of happy with what I was doing, and the idea of a documentary seemed interesting. We thought, well, maybe it'd be about behavioral economics or evolution and how our hunter-gatherer past had us evolve for a world that we aren't well suited for in our modern world with technology and cities and all of these. COVID's a good example of some of the mismatches with our modern world, and so what happened was I happened to be booked at this conference, MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. They have this psychedelic science conference that they generally do every 4 years. And Matt and I were talking, and I was like, it's too bad we didn't talk about this sooner, because there's this weird psychedelic conference. It's the biggest in the world. It only happens every 4 years. The who's who of psychedelic research is going to be there. And so we ended up like, well, let's just make a documentary about psychedelics. You're on this tour. You already have the jokes. We'll be able to show some of your stand-up. Let's go get some interviews. We went to this conference. He brought Brian Bellenkoff, the director and editor and filmmaker. Brian did everything for the film. It was really like very close to a one-man operation. Brian's going to be in the Ask Me Anything as well. By the way, Matt will be checking in here and there, but he has a kind of a busy day, and he doesn't have as many questions that he'll be able to answer. Probably he did a lot of budget stuff and putting together schedules and all the important stuff that goes underappreciated usually. But Brian will be answering a lot of the kind of more exciting filmmaking questions. So we shot this thing. We went there for a weekend, just all day long. Just interviewing all the researchers we possibly could at this conference. Got done with it, and we were like, well, now what do we do? And well, it's probably gonna combine some of my good trip show, and so maybe we just use that as kind of the skeleton of what we want to do. What if we just go out and show me doing psychedelics and see if that's a legal thing that we can do and shoot and put on screen? And that was that. And we shot it in no time. From the time we started shooting to the time we finished, it was like maybe 6 months. And then and a lot of that was editing and stuff on the fly. And we had so it started in March. We had it released in its first festival. We submitted to festivals December that year. We're in festivals the following year, and then on Amazon the year after that. So 2019, I guess. And so that's some of the origin story. I'll share some Easter eggs and some other things like that, but that's the gist that gives you a lot of what you need to know for asking questions today.